During today's session, we aim to give you an insight into the exciting software that's available today for automating accounts payable and other back and front office processes. We'll start off with an overview of types of automation software. We'll be talking about how they can be applied in accounts payable in particular, discuss some of the factors which can help you choose the right software for your particular situation. Before we start looking at these technologies in the context of AP automation, there's a word that's going to be cropping up a lot during our conversation, and that word is robot. The word robot's derived from the Czech word robota, and it rose to prominence in a play called Russell's Universal Robots way back in 1920. Robotniks, or robots, were literally a form of slave labor. And whilst that's a concept which has absolutely no place in the modern world, it does clearly link robots with the idea of doing work on behalf of people. For a long time after the 1920s, robots only occurred in science fiction. But over recent decades, the meaning has changed, and the Cambridge Dictionary now describes robots as machines that are controlled by computers and do jobs automatically. And again, we see that link between robots and work. The robots we usually think of are physical objects doing physical tasks. They're hardware robots, replacing humans working with physical objects. But of course, humans also perform work using software. We spend a lot of our time every day working with software, be it on our mobile phone, on our iPads or our laptops. And in our daily work, many of us spend time entering data, checking, validating, matching, making decisions, transferring information from one system to another, and so on. But the good news is that if that work is repetitive and it's rules-based, then it's a candidate for automation by software robots. So software robots are software which can work with other software to replace or mimic human activity. And the distinction between replacing or mimicking is key to our discussion about the difference between BPM and RPA software robots. So let's start by defining what we mean by BPM, certainly in the context of accounts payable automation. BPM is short for business process management, and it's what most AP automation is based on today. BPM uses workflow to orchestrate both human and software robot activity, and it typically includes capabilities such as document capture, data capture, electronic forms, and typically API level integration, so that is transferring data from system to system directly using software. And it includes BI and reporting so that we can visualize what's happening within the process. So BPM is great for transforming end-to-end processes, including AP automation, but in lots of other areas of business, both back office and front office too. BPM is really well suited to generic requirements such as AP automation because it incorporates best practice. BPM AP automation has been developed over many years, and it benefits from that long-term development by building in best practice and enabling us to take advantage of the best tools available. It tends to be high volume and high performance, and there are lots of standard vendor solutions available, including our own. So BPM is a way of transforming process, and where possible, it replaces human tasks, human activity with software robots. And those software robots tend to run silently on computers in your IT server room, automating tasks such as reading and matching invoices, posting transactions to your finance system. And where humans are required to handle exceptions, it makes human actions easier as well by doing things like replacing in trays and cabinets with online work queues. Of course, it rids us of paper. It gives us simple data entry forms instead of complex finance system screens, and provides reports and analysis and therefore visibility, as well as adding in components such as supply portals to enable our suppliers to interact with us directly and mobile access for people out on the road. So BPM typically transforms your process, replacing it with something automated and better. And the results from BPM can be truly spectacular in terms of efficiency and cost saving, but it requires time to plan and implement such significant process change. Now, in the last few years, another form of software robot has started to appear, which automates in a very different way and can be much faster to implement. And that software is RPA, or Robotic Process Automation. Documation has got a very strong partnership with an RPA company called Uipath. So here's a description of RPA in their words. RPA is essentially computer software that automates repetitive, rules-based tasks typically performed by humans on their computer by utilizing the user interface to manipulate data and applications just as a human would. In other words, it mimics human activity. And it can do all of the things that you'd expect a human be able to do when working with a piece of software. Opening emails, moving files and folders, copying and pasting, filling in forms, and so on. So RPA is typified by mimicking human actions. It can operate any application, and unlike humans, once you've programmed it correctly, it can do that without making mistakes and without stopping. So a robot, unlike a human, will work 24/7, 365. And because it mimics human actions and operates on any of your existing applications, it doesn't require comprehensive process change, and therefore it can be very quick and powerful in terms of implementation and scaling. So these are some of the reasons why RPA is top of the strategic agenda for many companies. It's because RPA can help improve efficiency of processes and effectiveness very quickly. It gives better accuracy, it increases speed and productivity, and gets rid of non-value-add processes, which allows your teams to get on and move into more valuable decision-making roles. And because it follows the rules slavishly, robotically, it gives greater compliance. So it's not surprising that we find that right now RPA is the largest investment and focus area for many companies in terms of their IT spend, eclipsing even the cloud as a method of automating, and that's where investment is going for many, many companies. So RPA is a tool which is becoming widely adopted throughout the globe. It's driving business growth, and the Uipath vision for RPA is that eventually there will be a software robot for every person working alongside us and taking away the mundane and repetitive tasks that we all have to perform every day, and freeing us up to spend more time doing more valuable work. So given that RPA will have such a far-reaching impact on the future of work, why Uipath in particular? We chose to work with Uipath because they're seen by independent analysts as leaders in the field, with both the strongest current offering and the strongest forward-looking strategy. Uipath's robots can work seamlessly in the background as unattended, but also they can work alongside us as humans, so that we can interact with them directly. We can teach a robot to perform a task like filling in our finance data entry screen, and if it hits an exception, it can ask us for a bit of information or a bit of guidance to help it move along. So summarizing, RPA, Robotic Process Automation, uses robots to mimic human activity. And in doing that, it can accomplish all of the things that we can accomplish through our screen and keyboard. It's great for automating individual tasks like creating supplier accounts or posting to finance systems, copying data from spreadsheets, and so on. So it's really well suited to places where there are gaps between processes and systems. So if we go into our finance team and look at how many spreadsheets they're filling out every day, for example, and where they're transferring data between systems or onto spreadsheets or off them. RPA is a great tool for automating those kind of gaps between processes. It handles repetitive user tasks really, really well. And because it doesn't require system change or process change necessarily, it can be very rapid to deploy and give us a very fast return on investment. And one of the cute things about it is that we can see it working alongside us. A way of comparing these types of software robot is to consider a repetitive task that we all carry out, and that's washing dishes. If we want to get rid of that drudgery, get rid of that work so that we can do something more valuable, there are now two ways in terms of this kind of robotic software. The RPA approach will be to deploy a robot which will literally mimic the way that a human would do that, the way that we would do that work ourselves, by using a sink and a scrubbing brush. The BPM approach would be to transform and replace that task. And if you've ever climbed inside your dishwasher to see what goes on when it's working, you'll find it doesn't have a robot sitting inside it washing dishes. It's full of jets and whirling arms and spraying steam. It doesn't have to work like a human does. It transforms the process into something better. Both of those routes will get our dishwashing done for us. It's a question of choosing the right one in any particular situation. So to summarize at this point, BPM tends to replace the existing process with new best practice ways of working. It will embed itself within the finance system, transferring data to and from via direct interfaces or APIs. And it takes time to plan and implement because BPM is primarily a means of process transformation. The results can be spectacular, but it takes thought and time to change the process. RPA tends to be more on the surface. It uses the software robots to mimic human activity for individual tasks, such as logging into SAP or transposing data from one system to another. Where BPM would, for example, post invoices via an API, RPA could key them straight into the user interface in exactly the same way that you would do that yourself. This is clearly a simplification in order to get the message across today. But what we can see straight away is that BPM and RPA are branches of the same tree. They overlap in many areas, but they tackle the task of automation in very different ways. So at this point, I'm going to hand you back to Ellen, and we'll go through a polling question.
Yes, thanks, John. So with that in mind, we're at the point now where it's a chance for you to join in. So in a second, you will see a polling question appear, and it's going to be asking you what you have or be planning to implement in your own organisation. You'll see some multiple choice answers. So we just select the answer which appears to be most appropriate for you. And so we're just going to launch that question for you now. You should see that appearing on your screen. So the question is, what have you or will you be implementing in your organization? So if you can select the answer which is most appropriate to you out of a selection of, we have implemented BPM automation in AP, we have implemented RPA automation, we plan to implement BPM automation in AP, we plan to implement RPA automation, or probably none of the above. So if you select the answer which you feel is most appropriate to you, then that would be great. And we'll just, I can see those results coming in now. I can see that 70% of you have voted. If the rest of you could continue to provide your answers, we'll be able to show you what the results have been. So I'm going to be closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, it's just going to close that poll now and show you the results. Okay, so let's have a look then. So that's interesting, John, isn't it? We can see there that really following on from what you were saying, there's quite a few organizations that are in fact planning to implement this technology, bearing in mind it's still relatively new to the marketplace. You know, going back a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have expected to see those kind of results at all. What do you think this shows to you, John?
I think it's really interesting. It backs up the kind of findings that we see in the marketplace and the level of AP automation. Given that BPM type automation has been around for probably 20 or so years now, it still surprises us how few organizations have taken it up and how much appetite there is for automation. But I think what we're seeing there is that RPA automation is the new kid on the block, so to speak, but already quite a number of organizations have adopted it. And that, I think, points to the fact that RPA can be a very quick technology to implement. And I think the other side of that is that almost nobody, only 10% of respondents are saying that they are not planning to either implement on and have not implemented automation in accounts payable. So there's a lot of people who are planning automation in the near future, and we've seen that ourselves in other surveys that we've done, that at least 50 or 60% of organizations are looking to automate in AP over the next year or so. So I think that's really helpful, and it shows us perhaps the way forward in terms of automation.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some like you're saying, I think particularly with the RPA, there's been it's come along leaps and bounds in terms of what people are going to be implementing and what they know about the technology. Mm-hmm. And probably what you say there about the quick wins, it's a game changer, I think. Okay, well, Absolutely. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, everybody, for taking part in that polling question. We're just going to close that for you now and continue with the rest of the webinar. Thanks very much, John. If you wanted to continue with your insights, please.
Okay, thanks, Helen. So we've taken a quick look at BPM and RPA and an overview, if you like, of the types of capabilities they have and the differences between them in terms of the way they're implemented. But the third part of our question for today is about AI, artificial intelligence. AI has got many, many facets, and far too many to discuss here, but some of those which are most relevant to us in AP are these. First of all, computer vision. So that's the ability to recognize documents using software and read the information from them. Next, natural language processing. And that's understanding the meaning of information. So using artificial intelligence to understand the semantics and the meaning of information that we gather using software. So a place where that might play out in an accounts payable situation is where we're receiving, for instance, email inquiries from our suppliers. We can use software to capture those email questions, and we can use AI with natural language processing to understand the sentiment, the meaning of the text that lies within. So we can use our software with artificial intelligence to detect whether a supplier inquiry is asking for a balance update or asking for a payment date, or asking for a reconciliation, or perhaps sending us some more details of their latest address. AI is the part of our software that brings logic and enables our robots to apply logic to make decisions based on the information that they have available to them. So it's essential, artificial intelligence, in the way that robots work. And finally, machine learning. So that's the ability for software to improve decisions based on an analysis of past outcomes. So if you couple those last two together, the ability to apply logic and the ability to learn and make better and better decisions over time, we can see why AI is such a powerful force in the world of automation. So that highlight on analysis is also crucial. And it brings us to another facet of automation that's very, very important, and that's data analytics. Whereas for humans, creating audit trails and recording progress and tasks that they've accomplished is more and more manual work, robots, particularly software robots, are quite brilliant at collecting data. We live in a world of big data, and it opens all sorts of doors for us to analyze and improve. So RPA and BPM will both measure process activity, and they'll monitor outcomes. And it's that ability to see what's happening in the process and to look at where things are going wrong, where they're going right, that drives machine learning. Data analytics helps in other ways too. With BPM in particular, it gives us analysis of our current status of our accounts payable solution. Planning resource becomes easier, and so does prioritizing work. It brings monitoring against KPIs, which allows to identify bottlenecks. And it brings financial transaction analysis too, which allow us to look at and drive supplier and buyer behavior, getting them to purchase more efficiently, getting the suppliers to comply with our rules for instance, for making sure that we've got purchase orders on every invoice, which tends to be the bane of most AP automation, AP teams' lives. So, BPM, RPA, or AI. AI and analytics are crucial components of both RPA and BPM. And in that sense, artificial intelligence stands apart from this debate. But with robots and artificial intelligence and analytics, we combine those together and we have the power to create intelligent automations. So, we've established that AI will be an essential part of our automation journey, whichever software we use. And how do we choose between BPM and RPA? They're both tools which can automate and improve processes. So how do you choose which software to implement? And how might they apply to AP? Let's take a look at a very simple AP process, capturing information from invoices and posting it into our finance system to get our suppliers paid. That's a typical, repetitive, mundane, and potentially error-prone activity that robots can do far better and far faster than humans. In a manual process, we receive emails. Very often we see in accounts payable teams, those emails get printed out to paper. Not everywhere, thankfully, but it happens a lot. And then there's a task of keying that information into the finance system. So in a manual process, all of that work is done by our accounts payable team. So let's have a look at the way a Uipath robot would do that work. RPA can provide us with a competitive advantage because it helps us improve both accuracy and speed of operations, whilst at the same time very radically driving down costs. So how does that work? In this video, we're going to show you how a Uipath robot streamlines an invoice process end to end. And you'll see a robot performing the following activities. It's going to monitor a dedicated email folder where invoices are arriving. It will read the invoices from that folder one by one. It will extract the key information from the invoices, open SAP all on its own and log in, fill in the invoice details into SAP, and finally send an email notification to advise us that that task has been completed. Now, some of the robotic actions will happen in the background. Right now, the robot is monitoring a folder. So let's see it at work. The robot's monitoring the folder where 3 invoices are stored and collecting all the information needed so that it can register them into SAP. It's just popping up a question for its human advisor, asking where the posting notification should be sent. And then it's performing basic checks to make sure that SAP is open and finally logging into SAP using its own credentials. And then it starts to process the invoices one by one. We can see it filling in data such as vendor code and invoice date in exactly the same way as a human would do, but in this case there is no human hand on the keyboard. Following that, it registers the remaining 2 invoices, and you get some sense of the speed at which it can do this, typically 15 times faster than a human. And finally, it sends an email containing the SAP registration number automatically. Checking the background, the robot is going to verify whether the VAT on the invoice matches our expectation, and if so, it will post it automatically. But otherwise, it will park it in SAP and send a dedicated email out to the person responsible, highlighting the difference and asking what to do next. The invoice's details are visible in the email that the robot creates. So if we reply with a yes in this instance to that message, SAP can complete its final checks, use the appropriate transaction code, and post the invoice into SAP, ready to be paid. And that's it. The robot successfully posted 3 invoices into SAP with only minimal human interaction. So we've seen how in a manual process, it's our AP team who are having to complete all of those tasks, and that using an RPA robot, or indeed a BPM robot, we can automate much of that work with only minimal intervention required from the AP team, which of course reduces their work and frees them up to do more valuable things. The same story is true with paper invoices. We can train robots to, once we've scanned those paper invoices, we can train the robots to capture the information and to carry out the posting for us, again with minimal human interaction. And if we want to go a step further with automation, a BPM process in particular will bring us the opportunity of having a supplier portal so that our smaller suppliers can key their own invoices direct into our system, with a robot doing all the checking and validating along the way. Or we could go a step further and use e-invoicing to transfer invoice data direct from our supplier system into our own. And again, with the robots taking care of compliance and control and making sure that only valid invoices get through. So in our first example, RPA or BPM robots, and in that instance, RPA robots, can handle almost all of the work done by the AP team. But in many cases, the AP process is more complex than simply capturing the information and registering it and posting it into the finance system. For example, if the invoice is purchase order related, we're likely to have to do a 3-way match. And that might require resolution of problems such as lack of receipts or changes in pricing. If it's a non-purchase order invoice, of course, we may well have to geocode it and get it approved and authorized. And there may well be more than one way of posting into our finance system. Other activities conducted by the AP team include things like rejecting invoices with letters back to suppliers if they don't meet our criteria. And we'll be receiving inquiries from suppliers all the time, of course. Bringing all those activities into a BPM workflow will help us enormously by giving us control and visibility at every stage of that process. It will simplify the work of the people as well by providing simple online forms to code and approve invoices and resolve match queries. And it can perform complex 3-way matching. It can reject invoices direct to suppliers without us needing to raise a letter manually. And in many cases, we'll be able to handle supplier inquiries, again, without any AP team involvement. And can provide a supplier portal so that suppliers can create their own invoices in our system, or can self-serve with answers to their questions. And both BPM and RPA will provide us the reports and information we need to monitor the process. And with BPM in particular, we can provide mobile access to authorize invoices along the way. So let's take a look at how a BPM workflow might simplify the areas where people do have to intervene. In this example, an invoice has been captured which requires coding. An email is sent to the correct recipient automatically by the robot. That person can then open and view the invoice online, so no paper. And using artificial intelligence, we can guide that person through the coding process, making sure, for instance, that they comply with the rules in terms of which codes they're allowed to use, helping them and hinting them to streamline that process by giving them codes that they've used previously. And finally, enabling them to, just with a single click, send that invoice along its way through the workflow. And of course, at this stage, the software is making the decision for us using artificial intelligence again and using its logic to determine who is the right person to authorize that invoice. So ensuring that we have control and compliance. Having coded that invoice, then we can see that the robots will have sent that out to approval to the correct person. That person receives an invoice into their in tray. They can open it with a single click, see the invoice in question, review the coding, and if they're happy, authorize it and move that invoice straight through to posting. And because this is a robotic process, information is captured about that invoice all the way through. And we will find that we've got facilities, therefore, which will help us to find and review that invoice again whenever we need to in future. Because BPM in particular will provide us a means of retrieving, searching for invoices, be able to view them on the screen, see their history. So here, for example, we're going back to an invoice that has already been posted and paid. We're able to see the invoice and we can see every action that was taken on that invoice throughout its life cycle, whether it was by robots or by humans. And along the way, if we've captured any comments from our own team or from our suppliers, those are visible too. So BPM is giving us a workflow process that gets rid of paper. It puts the invoices on the desk of the individual online, and it joins together the robotic activities. So we've taken a brief look at both RPA and given a flavor of this, RPA and BPM, and given a flavor of their strengths and abilities, and the different approach that they each take to automation. Making a choice between them is partly a matter of looking at each task and deciding which approach is required. But another important factor in that decision is that of scale. Sticking with our kitchen analogy, if your vision is to transform the whole kitchen, that may well help determine the best type of automation software to use. So you might well want to start by looking at the pain points in your AP department. Which parts of your process are currently broken and how seriously? It may just be a couple of areas, and RPA could well be the right answer for that. Or it could be that what's needed is process transformation, where you've got pain points in many areas and a broken process. Having mapped out the scale of the problem, there are different approaches to consider in terms of implementation, and here again both BPM and RPA may have a part to play. Phasing your automation project allows you to reduce AP time and workload and reduce your costs incrementally. So each time we introduce some automation, we reduce our cost and workload, we free up people's time to take the next step in the automation and so on. And even when we finished our project, the information we're going to gather allows us to analyze and improve along the way. A different approach, and typically this is what we might find with a holistic process transformation, is that we can review and plan our automation and take all those automation steps in one go. But RPA also opens up for us another opportunity, and that is to implement a robot which transforms part of our process really quickly, perhaps the posting or the document and data capture. And that frees us up the time and some cost to replan our processes. So redeploying people within our AP team to consider the best process to take us forward longer term. So one of the advantages of rapid deployment that RPA brings is to kickstart your process transformation. As well as looking at scale and priorities and timescales, another factor which might influence our choice of software tool is the technical strategy of the work, such as invoice posting. Remembering that RPA replicates the way that humans would post invoices, and BPM tends to interface directly to the finance system using APIs, some of our decision factors might be based around what's available to us in terms of posting, for example. So do we have an API interface into our finance system? Do we have the IT resources available to handle that interface? And are we performing customized or standard posting? Because many AP automation tools will have a standard posting capability for most finance systems. But if we've heavily customized our finance system and our posting, then RPA may be a simpler route to glory in terms of speeding that process up. All of these factors are leading us to a conclusion for our main question, if we should be using either BPM or RPA. And the answer is that these types of software are not competitors. They overlap in some areas, and they each have particular strengths which might make them more or less suitable in a particular project. And in fact, the right answer could be RPA, or it could be BPM, or it could be a combination of both of those technologies. So again, in the words of Uipath, adding RPA to BPM can let bots handle repetitive and mundane tasks, and it might well automate integrations that are not easily accessible via APIs. If we add BPM into an RPA scenario, it means we can engage with the human workers much more effectively to handle exceptions in quite complex ways. And we can orchestrate the manual approvals and the business rules and the integrations with other systems. And if we join both of those technologies together, we can orchestrate and automate an end-to-end process that brings humans, the robots, and the systems working together in a seamless process. In any automation project, BPM, RPA, or otherwise, there are some really critical success factors that you must consider from the start, particularly if you're going to use an RPA-based approach. Even if you're going to begin by putting a toe in the water, choosing the correct automation tools for your situation is critical. And so is structuring the project properly from the start with the right expectations, the right team, and the right governance. So here are some of the things that we need to consider when we're choosing and planning and implementing our automation strategy. We need collaboration between business and IT and stakeholders. And we need to make sure we prioritize our business objectives and process areas as effectively as we can. We might want to select a simple process for proof of concept and work through an agile delivery approach, which brings us benefits as we gain automation. We need to be very careful with our change management, making sure that we update our strategy and our approach as we learn lessons through our automation journey. We need to make sure we've got full leadership buy-in and support, and that we're engaging our AP team and our other process teams as we go on the journey. We need to consider compliance really early on and engage with our security and internal audit teams so that we can anticipate and head off roadblocks. And we need to think about scaling, because automation is available for any back or front office process, and we shouldn't simply be thinking in terms of automating just AP. If we are buying into the right tools and the right mindset, there's no reason why that automation can't spread throughout the organization. So we need to make sure right from the get-go that we've got a proper governance and structure in place, and that we're monitoring and tracking our business cases and the benefits that we're gaining. So whichever route you go down, working with a partner who's got the experience to take you through those decisions will help you make sure that your project is not short-term excitement and gain for long-term chaos and pain, but it's a roadmap for long-term success and value. So just to summarize, BPM is brilliant at transformation and exception handling that requires people in particular. RPA is a fantastic tool for automation of tasks, and it brings us fast improvements and frees people up to do more valuable work. And AI is the glue that brings intelligence into both of those tools to make sure that they bring us maximum value. But essentially, all of these technologies are branches of the same tree. And the choice isn't between them, it's a choice of using the right tools in the right place at the right time.